Imagine the impact of the combination of these five things for financial institutions like banks, credit unions, insurance and wealth companies, and the tech and solution providers that work with them. New competitors coming out of nowhere with great products, accelerating adoption of digital channels by your customers, the introduction of new tech that makes what incumbents have obsolete way before it's paid for, customers always evolving needs, and finally, the unpredictability of life, things like a pandemic that has changed the way we all do things forever. Combine it all together, and it's what I call the FinTech Effect, the pressure to change faster than ever before. This new podcast is for innovators and leaders inside traditional financial services companies, aka incumbents, who want ideas or solutions to some of the challenges they're facing. Today's guest is Anna Foat, a passionate innovator who focuses on ensuring that teams are solving a customer problem using design. Her role is strategic global XD education at SunLife. Anna helps me define what the FinTech effect is, and then highlights some of her big company innovation experiences, which include what not to do, key lessons learned, and also about how important empathy and empowerment is in innovation. Welcome, Anna.
So it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. And by way of introduction, I work at SunLife. I work in global marketing. I perform a function that's kind of interesting. I certainly love it. Helping our executives understand the power of design and design as a tool to create strategy. So along with every kind of tool that's very familiar to the insurance industry, actuarial science, there's lots of accountants, there's lots of number crunching, there's lots of quantitative analysis, to try to really spend some time with them, showing them that some of the qualitative ways of knowing can really help inform and de-risk the kind of future of insurance, or the future of what we want to do, maybe not in the next few quarters, but in the next few years.
Wow. That's I've never heard you put it that way. That's great. Can you give a little example of what that looks like so that people can relate to it?
Sure. So, just like every big incumbent, we, with really good intention, decide that we're going to tackle a problem. And oftentimes, just like most big incumbents, we sit in a boardroom and we all talk to each other about it. We're very smart people. We know many things. And so we talk through it and we go, we know we have the solution. We're competent, useful people with a bias towards action. And we just start building the solution. We often don't really check in with members, sponsors, advisors, employees, depending on what it is we're doing, to see what their actual issue is. We're often very clear on what our issue is. Like, we would like it if everyone digitally onboarded, but we don't understand necessarily why our clients will or won't do that, or what would motivate them to do it. And so a lot of the work is trying to bring the client back into the center of everything that we do, to say, it's great that we have an organizational desire to do XYZ. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, but how we do it, and if we want to be successful, it's critical to actually talk to the people we're going to either be doing it to or with, and figure out what their thoughts, beliefs, and desires are about this, so that we can tailor this thing that's organizationally important to us in a way that's going to be appealing to whoever our target user group is, so that they adopt the thing and we get the results that we talked about in PowerPoint. I've been moved around organizationally, I think not for no reason. So prior to kind of fully being inside global marketing, was dual reporting into IT strategy and kind of global marketing. But we're a big, complicated organization. So I think I become less concerned about where I'm at organizationally, and what I'm trying to do increasingly is orient the work. So to say to folks that are journey designers, for example, like, the stuff that I'm doing really has no impact on the amazing work that you do. I'm trying to figure out, before we get started, are we asking the right question? Like, is our thesis correct? Have we done enough research? Do we know enough about the problem? So that when it gets to people executing, we're actually solving for a problem that has merit, as opposed to, I went to a conference and I heard a guy, and I think that we should, all of a sudden pivot and do this thing over here, which may or may not be indicative. We do a lot of, it's easy to become an N of one. I feel this way, so everyone must feel this way.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, we are not the customer. Okay, so when you hear that sort of phrase, the FinTech effect. What does it make you think? Or what do you think the FinTech effect has done to SunLife, is doing?
I think for me, like, as you know, I love the startup scene. So I'm very kind of watching signals and very interested in what people are doing. So for me, very interested in what smaller, more niche, more agile companies are doing, because what I do is go, huh, they actually think the problem is this problem, and they're trying
Mhm.
to solve this problem in this way. We have both the advantage and the disadvantage of kind of being big and having to be all things to many people. But watching what smaller agile companies are doing, I think regardless of, even if you take no action as the big incumbent, you would be foolish not to kind of do a scan on a fairly regular basis to go, huh, there seems to be a lot of energy around this concept that either is not on our radar, and maybe it
Mhm.
shouldn't be,
Mhm.
or we haven't thought about the problem the same way. And again, I go back to, is it because we don't know enough about the problem, or is it because this problem doesn't affect us? Because sometimes these things are blips that, don't
Yep.
matter to a big incumbent, but
Yep.
not minding that store, I think, is a risk.
How long has innovation been a thing at SunLife?
Well, I think, I was actually doing some research on this because I feel like one of the kind of boulders that you kind of have to push over is, oh my God, we can't possibly respond because the world is just changing so fast. Like, it's
Mhm.
just impossible to get your head around it. And I was sitting here one day going, is that like true though? Not to say there hasn't been an enormous amount of change in the last 3
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
but when you like look at decades, like the change between 1920 and 1950 was massive,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
multiple times bigger than what we're facing today. So it's almost like, don't
Hmm.
like, don't use the crutch of, well, it's just too hard. Like, everything's just so big and fast, we couldn't do it. And I think there's a little bit of that. And then there's a little bit of, well, there's these new technical affordances. So without even really understanding client need, well, let's tinker with that a little bit because maybe these things kind of meet in the middle. And then
Yeah.
at the same time, like, I know for myself, and I think a lot of people, their views on a whole bunch of societal things have just changed a lot. What's
Yeah.
important to them, who they're
Yep.
loyal to, where they get information from. So then you kind of layer all those things together and you're like, huh, it's a bit of a stew to try to to kind of tease out the thing that we always knew to be true is no longer true. This new thing that maybe we never really considered before, all of a
Yeah.
sudden is a thing.
Innovation's been happening for a while at SunLife. Whether you think of SunLife as innovative or not, I don't know. But the more importantly, can you share any of your experiences? And they don't have to be about SunLife; they can just be whatever. But in terms of where you think, the FinTech effect has actually created, the wrong response, um,
Mm.
or maybe, examples of where, things have actually worked out really well. And whatever you can sort of, protect the innocent. I don't want to learn about any, secrets or anything, but like, I mean, I could talk about partnering situations that have been disasters for the startup and frankly for the incumbent,
Yep.
and why. And that's one example. But yeah, do you have any that come to mind?
Well, I think you're right. I think that big and small and trying to find some kind of collective middle ground, that
Hmm.
is not for the faint of heart. And,
Yeah.
I would say to you, having navigated that previous to joining Sun Life, it's really complicated and hard. And the financial industry has never really done it. They've never really
Hmm.
had to do it, and they've never really done it. So it's hard and it's never been done. And I don't know that there's always enough empathy and understanding for the position of the startups. And
Mm.
there can be this organizational arrogance of, did you know we're gigantic and we've been around since the dawn of time? Which, is not a constructive position to set up a partnership from.
Yeah.
Um, there's a big disconnect too between tech stacks and like what's near term possible.
Yeah.
And then this, like, we have such a monopolistic kind of environment in Canada that oftentimes I'll hear, well, like no one's doing that anyways.
Right.
And it's like,
Right.
okay, like maybe it's because it's a poor idea. That could very well be. Maybe
Yeah.
there's no market fit for it, but maybe it's just because it's this tiny little incumbent or tiny little startup, and for them to have gotten so many customers in such a short amount of time, like that's not something that you should not kind of study and try to understand why there's a center of gravity there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I hope that it lifts all boats. Like I hope big incumbents watch with a bit of humility and a bit of curiosity, like, oh, this is happening, this is converting, this is what people are drawn to. At the
Yeah.
same time, startups, I think it's hard for them to appreciate, like, we have
Yeah.
all kinds of regulatory and, we have legitimate reasons why this is hard. And it's, even if there's a desire to do it, it also isn't easy going big to small.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but then there's this belief that, big companies either can't attract the right people, or if they attract the right people, internally their processes are so difficult that a lot of this stuff dies on the vine. So
Mm-hmm.
I really think the most efficient path forward is not to recreate the wheel, is to try to figure out how
Mm-hmm.
what each party has that the other needs, and
Yeah.
then put the ego aside and say, we're coming to the party with this, you're coming to the party with this. This is the sort of cake we're going to make. We're going to do it
Yeah.
together for 18 months. We're going to give it a little oxygen, and have some intentionality around it. Otherwise, big companies spin on their mainframes, little companies spin with no clients. And at the end
Yeah.
of the day, clients go, why is all this suck so bad? It's 2023. Why am I waiting 7 days for my money?
Yeah. 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 Yep. Uh-huh. I just I have so many things popping into my head. I just went through the process of starting a new company, and I'm writing a kind of a two-part blog about, some of the good and the bad and the ugly of what I have gone through. But yet again, um, getting a bank account, which should be so freaking easy, has been crazy. And yeah, I mean, it can be kind of frustrating when you think about all the challenges that you have to go through, and to get something like a partnership with a startup happen, or you know advance your capabilities to allow people to digitally open accounts. Like, those things are tough. And do you have, like, in your mind, is there a straight sort of path for someone who, like, is in your position? You have the ability to affect change in your organization. Like, what do you do first?
Well, I'll tell you all the ways that did not work, and kind of this new thing I'm testing. And the jury's out
Okay.
on whether or not it will work. But, when I first joined, I was all, full of energy and enthusiasm and was going to change the world in the next 90 days. Well, you can't actually do that. Then it was like, there's these amazing startups. So I'm going to explain to people in the business that I know have these challenges. I'm going to try to be like matchmaker, to say, like, I know you have these challenges, and guess what? There's a company that's like solving that problem. You could like get
Right.
it for like $1 million next quarter. Like, you could do it like next week. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
also did not land. They were like, we don't want to do anything next week, Anna. And I was like, okay. And also, that's a gift. Like, listen, we didn't ask for that gift. You came with this big bow, this gift with a bow on it. Like, it's not my birthday. Get out of here. So I was like, okay. So we did some
That is,
features work with.
sorry. I think anyone who's listening to this has got to, and if you're in a role that involves, whether you call it innovation, whatever you want to call it, that is both, all those situations happen, right?
Well, listen, I've done it. I've ran into the cement wall at 100 miles an hour. I don't recommend it to anyone. It does not work. Doesn't matter the people, doesn't matter the startup, doesn't matter the idea. It just doesn't work. So
Yeah.
we did a bunch of foresight work with one of our business units, which was personally for me, super great to understand that there was a group of senior leaders who were willing to kind of go on this journey, to do a thing that was like not comfortable for them, not necessarily kind of their background, educational background, their experience or anything. So like 75% of me is like, this is a win just because they're willing to do it. They're willing to
Yeah.
take their time, which is their most precious resource, and do this thing over here.
Yeah.
In so doing that work, my new strategy that I'm testing out, which I think even if I run into the cement wall, I will do it at a slower velocity,
Right.
is to say to folks, like, this is the thesis. Like, do we have religion on this thesis? Like, outside of the tech, outside of the impact, like, just on the problem. Do we agree that this is a problem? And if we agree it's a problem, how relatively complicated and near term is the problem? Because sometimes I think like everyone in their own mind has a slightly different articulation of the problem, a slightly different output. Like they can read the same PowerPoint and go, yeah, we're aligned. But then when you say, well, the solution is this, they're like, whoa, that like, no, I didn't quite see it that way. Or, oh, I didn't realize the implication. And so spending a lot more time at the outset to really, again, make sure that like, just because it's an industry problem, is it aligned with our kind of 2024 strategy? Like,
Yeah.
is this
Yeah.
something that we would even have people to work on? Like, do people that are going to sponsor this work, are they not just, yes, I agree it's a problem, but like enthusiastically, I endorse us spending time to try to solve this in the way that you've articulated.
Right.
Which sucks
Wow.
for me because you know me, I just want to get started. It's like, can I just start? And I'll just like let you know how it goes. So I have to be like, okay, gear down, back her up.
So I have a theory that, you know, good things will happen based on what you just described. But, you know, the best and easiest path would require a top-down approach. Like, because very few people, and I mean, like you, I've been, you know, I've run a bazillion miles into the brick wall, both on my own behalf and on behalf of clients. And and you know, yeah, there's all this stuff we could talk about what it feels like to be that person. Because you know, everyone thinks that these roles, like role that you have, is so glamorous, and yet, you know, it really is more thankless than it is glamorous, right? Because you're trying to affect change um, and bring new ideas and ways of doing things to the organization. And then, you know, I really do think if you don't have a top exec who's willing to say, if we're committing to this, then, you know, we may not use the same rules and processes, and, you know, there may be a different rule book for this. So I'm going to tell you, you know, like, we're not going to go make the startup go through a procurement process, right? Like, whatever the example is, but
Yep.
that would be the straightest path. And is it, so you're nodding. I haven't decided whether or not we may want to release some video, but I didn't ask you ahead of time. So, but you're nodding, and so you agree that that is the straightest path. So if you don't have that, do you just sort of pack up your toys and leave the sandbox, or what do you do?
Well, I think you have to, like, my thing is this, like, you have to go find where there's energy for this sort of work. So I am much less committed or married to like a problem or a line of business, or like I'm much more drawn to, here's a group of people who are very committed either because they get it, or more often than not, every other way has not worked. So mine's like the last way they're going to try. They're not
Right.
enthusiastically trying it. They're just like, all our ways didn't work. So you can give a kick at the can on this. Because then at least, like, it's not the gift that no one wanted. There is some energy, initiative, something like this thing needs to be solved. It's already been identified. So like less about, in a perfect world, we'd start at the beginning and like do all this work, because I'd love for it to work like that, but
Sure.
it doesn't. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, next best is you started a thing, you've recognized that it's not going well, you yourself are hitting a wall, you phone a friend, that friend is me. The best thing I can do is like come with empathy. The last thing I should do is be like, well, if you just friggin' well listened to me in the first place, we wouldn't be here. Like, the worst.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
best thing is like, listen, it sucks. Like, you're off the path and you know it and you don't know how to solve for it. And I don't know if I can solve for it, but I'll try, and I'll like meet you where you are and hold your hand, and like we'll try to figure this out together. That has been a lot more useful than initially when I started this role. It was like, we shall find the biggest problems in the company and you shall
Yeah.
fix them. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, of course that's not going to be the way it works, because all of those business units, they're trying to solve it in their own ways. And lots of those ways are probably really good.
I think innovation is needed, but it can sometimes have the, the creation of it can sometimes have a very, unintended consequence, right? Which is if you force it to be something that everybody has to go along with, you probably disengage a ton of people who say, I'm actually very capable at improving my retail banking, onboarding experience. And if, yeah, that's a priority, and I'm glad you see that. Just, leave it to me.
Yeah.
Or how about this? Here, I'm actually going to tell you, Anna, the expert, how I'm going to go about it. And if you have any suggestions on ways that we could maybe learn more about the customer and how to make sure we're solving the right problems, great. Otherwise, I don't think I need innovation to come in and take this over and, put it in a
Well,
lab or right? Like
the problem is all like because then every company's going this way. It's like, well, if it's cool, it has to be innovative. And if it's innovative, it might get funding. So then everyone stamps everything innovative for self-interested reasons. Listen, I get it. But like changing your website is not innovation. Like, you're fixing crap that you probably should have fixed a long time ago. So like yes, fix it. Like for sure fix it. But all this stuff doesn't have to all be labeled innovation. And I feel like we've kind of over rotated to either everything that we do needs to be innovative in some way, whatever that means, or it absolutely needs to have some new spangled tech. And it's like,
Mhm.
maybe it does. I don't know. Tech's just a tool though. Like what's the problem? And then how's the
Yeah.
tool related to the problem? Like we're I'm doing a big workshop in a couple weeks in Toronto with our emerging professionals network, which I love that we have that. I didn't even know that existed. So like junior professionals who have self-identified that they're going to be my boss any day now are part of this group. Um,
Awesome.
and I freaking love it. I was like, there's a group, there's 500 people in this group. Like, this is amazing.
Wow. Huh.
And they
Awesome.
said, we want to run our first in-person workshop. We were told that you could do that for us. And their original kind of idea was, well, let's do a design sprint on generative AI. Because of course that's
Mhm.
what they said, right?
Mhm.
And I was
Right.
like, okay, well, how long is this workshop? They're like 2 hours. I was like, yeah, so like we can't do that in 2 hours. That's not really a thing.
Yeah.
But like, and let me flip it, because all of you guys are like early to mid career professionals. You're not running a project, but you're influential and you're smart beavers, like you're eager beavers and you're smart. So people are listening to you, which is amazing. So maybe the best thing that you could do is ask better questions. Push your leaders, a
Mhm.
little bit, not to change the entire scope of the project, not to say you're doing it all wrong, but to say, like, have you thought about this? And what about this? And what about this? Because you're at the perfect level to do exactly that. So we built last week, we interviewed 5 people about their thoughts about generative AI in their personal life, in their professional life, and then personally, and then through a
Mhm.
work lens. And it was, as always, fascinating what people
Mhm.
kind of said in terms of their relative comfort level. And then
Mhm.
the only thing we're going to do with this amazing group is say, start thinking about how might we statements or opportunity areas, but I
Mhm.
want you to do it through the lens of these 3 personas, one who's extremely optimistic and one who's somewhat skeptical.
Okay.
Because if this thing that if you think you want to do, you almost always skip, is it desirable? It's
Yeah.
like, can we do it? Yep. Is it on track, on budget? Yep. Do we have the capabilities in house to deliver on it? We do. Does anyone want it? Not a clue.
That's so funny. Uh, that is so true. Yep. It's feasible. I mean, we can beat to death how feasible it is. And yeah. Um, very interesting. Very cool. Hmm.
I'm looking forward to it because I feel like I'm like an army of one sometimes, but then I'll be an army
Yeah.
of 51. There'll be 50 other people asking impertinent questions and like getting their hooks into things. And I mean, really just asking, how do you know that to be true? It's not a
Yeah.
it's not an attacking, aggressive question. It's just, okay, we collectively believe this. Why? Like, on what
Yeah.
basis do we believe it? And how does it impact clients or not, or advisors or not, or employees or not?
Yeah. Yeah. Your point about technology too, you were telling me your story about your recent financial product that you had to get. I don't know if you want to share some of the tidbits of that, because it's interesting how in the end, the result was it had nothing to do with technology to
No.
solve your problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, I sold my city house and I moved to the middle of nowhere, as you well know. A major Canadian bank had my business account, my personal account, my mortgage, my kids' accounts, all the accounts. Um, and when I discharged that mortgage, I cannot describe to you how frustrating that
Mm-hmm.
experience was. And I got really angry about it because I thought, Lord Almighty, I'm all in to you. Like you've got
Mm-hmm.
all the lines. And so I went on a little bit of a Twitter rant, as sometimes I want to do. And the former CEO of Libro Credit Union, who I knew socially in London, but didn't really know Steve Bolton, he DM'd me and said, Anna, listen, I see your recent frustration. He's like, we've realized during the pandemic that up until very recently, we always dealt with a very specific geographic region. And so we've never really considered or anticipated going outside Southwestern Ontario. But we've had 2 years with pretty much everything closed all the time. And it hasn't really affected anyone in region. So we've been talking about doing something like outside of region. How do we expand our scope outside of Southwestern Ontario? And you like new sparkly things and you are willing to kind of suffer with, some hiccups and bumps in the road. Would you be willing to be our first beta customer out of region? And so I honestly, Sue, was like, I've never even really considered joining a credit union. But I'm really angry with one of the major banks. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not like, oh my God, it would be so much better if I just went to this other bank. So I
Right.
thought, why not? Like, I'm going to give this a try. Had this very human connection managed through technology, just like we're talking today. Asked a bunch of questions around, like, I'm not near ATMs and like, how do I do some of the things that I used to do in branch and
Yeah. Yeah.
walk through a bunch of scenarios. And they were like, listen, we want to figure this out. So we're going to be much less, our policy is, and much
Mm-hmm.
more, what do you need? And like, how can we actually deliver on that for you? And I have to say, I've been thrilled. Like my
Wow.
husband's like, I call and they're nice. We call with these problems where we're like, we need to like wire this tradesperson like a significant amount of money. And I've always been told the threshold limit was an Interact imposed limit.
Yeah.
I call
Yeah.
Libro and they're like, no, that's an institutional limit. Like if you want to raise it to more than $3,000 for a day or two to facilitate this transfer so that you don't have to kind of go to the bank.
What?
They did. They were like, when's the start date? How much money do you need? And when are you
Jeez.
going to transfer it? And so it was like 3 days of a much higher limit. And then
Wow.
they went in and they turned it off for my own protection because they don't want fraud, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was always told that was not the bank's control. And they're like,
I
well,
did. I actually thought that too. Yeah.
and they were like, no, like for your protection, we do like to keep it to the $3,000 because it's better that way. But if you have a one-off use case, like we're quite happy to accommodate it. And so I've had like zero issues despite now needing much more complicated sort of advice. And I'm so physically distant. But I
Yeah.
will say, I think this orientation to what is it that you need and how can we help you get to where you want to go has made
Interesting.
all the difference, as opposed to our policy is, or the path is, or you can't cross this line because of this. They've been very creative about, well, if we did this and then we added this, then we get you where you need to go.
And you don't have to, fly to the nearest branch and sign something in ink.
Nope, I've been to all DocuSign, all remote. Um,
Wow.
Anything that I've had to do, because if you're a member of a credit union, you get access to every other credit union. And I think
Yeah.
they told me that's like 49% of all the bank machines. Like it's better than trying to find your bank's branded machine.
Yeah.
And I live in a steel town that's a union town. So there's 3 or 4 credit unions in the Sioux. So there's all kinds of ATMs. Like if I just need a bank
Right.
branch, and anything that I would generally do in the branch, I've done over Zoom.
Wow. And so, okay, so the devil's advocate in me says that's a small institution,
Mhm.
and that big bank that you were talking about, I mean, they can't possibly operate that way, right? I mean, they're just not enough people. Is that wrong? Like
I don't
to,
know, because if you think of the major banks, they've got people galore. If
yeah,
anything, Libro lacks a footprint. Libro lacks the number of staff. But I will say every single one of those staff members that I've interacted with to date has been very empowered. So as opposed to saying, you have to do
right.
it this way or I can't do that,
Yeah,
it's like, okay, well, let me think for a second, like what we could do.
yeah,
And that to me, like, listen, I'm not expecting magic, but just the orientation of we're going to listen to what it is that you need and we're going to try our darndest to try to figure out a way to deliver it to you.
yeah.
Like, I have not had that kind of service ever. I've
That's
had a,
pretty, yeah, yeah. And you know what? I have, but it was because of a person that was with one of the banks who, and we got lucky and we were part of one of their special programs that gave us access to a person for anything. Like we could, in the old days, we obviously had to call him, but that is, and and he was empowered, and so anything we needed, he did. And now it's, we actually stayed with him, and even though we're on Vancouver Island, he's in Guelph, Ontario, or not Guelph, Georgetown, Ontario. And
yep,
he's still our guy. But without him, I wouldn't be with that bank. And
right.
actually, that bank has tested my patience so much with the move, not because of that, but because of starting a business. Like, I can't believe that there is still not anyone who can open an account with the slightest bit of complexity, which is not that complex. It's just a new small business, has 2 shareholders.
Yep.
Can't friggin' open an account. Like, that is just inexcusable, in my opinion, that you have to actually, anyway.
Well, I watched some of that because I've certainly experienced that. And then, you hear the rationale, right? It's, anti-money laundering and know your customer and all these things, which, listen, yes,
Sure.
there's lots of legitimacy to that. And like banks need to be cautious and whatever. But then when you see some of the breaches, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, I can't remember which bank and I probably shouldn't name it, but like
Mhm.
$37 million in what they called a sophisticated fraud. And I read
Mhm.
the article. I'm like, they're kiting checks though. Like the
Mm.
1980s called. They want their, white crime back. Like check kiting? We couldn't catch check kiting in 2023?
Yeah, yeah.
So then I kind of go like, I don't know, I'm
Yeah.
of two minds. Like, yes, I get why they want to be cautious. Yes, I get that there's a lot at stake. And, sometimes these things need to be the process that they need to be for reasons. I get that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I think it's a lot of time at crutch because if you can't figure out how to stop check kiting, I don't think Sue Britton Inc. and her 2 shareholders are going to bring a major financial institution down. Like, I'm
No
pretty
kidding.
sure we can figure out a way to set up a checking account for your business.
Yep, yep. Now I have 2 months of mixed transactions I have to go and reconcile, and, I already have a business account with them too, which is the other thing, which is just pretty sad, not to mention all my personal stuff. But anyway, um, but I think the moral of the story is that, people are still very important,
Yep.
and I absolutely wanna do more digitally. In fact, if I can't do what I want to do digitally, knowing that it can be done digitally and that there's no real good reason to not let me, then I don't wanna waste my time going and seeing somebody.
Yep.
But that person, working for that institution should be proactive, should tell me when I'm about to do something that's not good, should be there for me when I need to talk to them and get advice. And I'm finding now that actually in all of my interactions, that's what I'm gravitating towards, is this happy blend of, you know, digital when I need it and a human that adds a ton of value and that I trust. Yeah.
I think it's the 80-20. Like 80% of the time, everything I do is boring and pretty standard, and I don't want or need to talk to anyone. But 20% of the time, there's like material reasons that, again, I don't do this for a living. Like, I want someone
Mhm.
who does this for a living to be like, if you do this, this is the upside and the downside. If you do it this way, this is the upside and the downside. Like,
Mhm.
that I can't really do well digitally. We, as part of
Mm.
this kind of hackathon design thing we're doing, there's a great article in Forbes that talked about ChatGPT as your financial advisor. And listen, ChatGPT crunched the numbers, but all of the kind of punchline of this article was all the nuance of goals. So like you want to
Yeah.
retire, but how do
Yeah.
you want to retire on safari? Do you want to eat cat food in like a basement apartment? Like, how do you want to retire? Because it
Yeah.
really matters.
Yeah.
All of that nuance was gone, and it didn't really get compounding interest or like government supplied benefits. So
Oh, yeah.
it
Yeah.
was like a math solution to a much more complex human problem.
Yeah.
And the human advisor in this story kind of said, like, it probably takes me 15 or 20 hours of conversations thinking about it for if I'm really going to do this well, to
Yeah.
actually have a customized plan. You and I can go on and like put numbers into some
Yep.
online calculator.
Yep. But you need a person. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm kind of hoping that moving forward, what we can do is offer, solutions to problems, help create ideas, or inspire ideas, or, um, you know, um, just bring some, I don't know, community to the table to kind of help people that are trying to really do great things like you are. And yeah, maybe just have a place to vent.
Well, and I think that what you're trying to do is so important because I'll often say to our teams, like, go find people that, that energize you because there's lots of people that this is really scary for. And most big organizations want it to be this kumbaya, everyone at the same time moment. And that's
Yeah.
just not how human beings work. And so you can't win them all. And even if you don't, like, oftentimes I fail, most times, but if it extends the conversation or if it makes people think a little differently about something, or if the next time you knock on that door, there's less resistance, like, that's not a bad outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you stay in it?
Honestly, the problems and the potential for impact are so huge.
Mhm.
Like, this is people's, when they think about not being here and
Mhm.
protecting their family and, saving money and doing those things, like, the affordance of a gigantic company is if you can even get one small idea, like, it doesn't have to be some big global thing, but just one little small idea, you can impact thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And if you can, a lot of it
Mm.
is like, make it suck less. Maybe it's not the big innovative idea, but could it just suck less? Like, could we make it more seamless for people? Could it be more intuitive? Could we just get a clue and try to figure out how people live their lives? Like, it's stressful for people. And so making it suck less would be good, coming up with something that really serves people. And my obsession is kind of people under 40. Like, how are we thinking about the next 5 or 10 years with people that have not been necessarily in the crosshairs of our kind of
Mhm. Mhm.
biggest, most ideal customers, because they're coming and their needs are so different. And so I'm always looking left and right. Like, okay, this
Mm.
thing's working well, but like, how is that going to work or not for the next wave of clients that are coming through?
I love what you just said about how, the special thing about big companies is that they can, you know, tweak one little thing and impact tens of thousands of customers. Huh. Very cool. Well, let's leave it there then.
Well, wonderful. It was such a pleasure. Anytime.